Hi, my name is Aleksandra, and we are doing Ancestral Conversations. And today I have a huge privilege to talk to Francesca Mason Boring. And she is the author, international facilitator, teacher, and lecturer working with universal indigenous fields in family constellation. She has supported development of constellation as ceremony, also community constellations and nature constellations. Francesca, welcome to this space and thank you so much for making time for this conversation about ancestors and family constellations. Welcome.
Thank you for doing this. I think it's a beautiful contribution and a support for all of us. I appreciate it.
My first question is, when you say ancestors, what does it mean? What does ancestors mean to you?
So, for me personally, it means my own bloodline, the people that I come from, the people who are really responsible for my literal flesh and bone. So everything that I am, every part of me as matter, comes from someone. And so when I acknowledge ancestors or speak about them or think about them, I become aware of those people with whom I share a family field. So I think that that there is that concept, that reality for me. It also is not just that my substance comes from them, but that it is a kind of relationship that is reciprocal. So I am aware of the fact, it's just biological reality, that I come from ancestors, but I also have respect for whatever their lives have been, whatever their path has been, whatever their experiences have been. And it seems as though, in exchange for having a particular level of respect, a particular kind of humility, the face of that very large body of experience and survival and resilience, then there are times that ancestors seem to actually provide some support for me. So I don't think it's limited to belief system. I think that if someone really begins to consider the resilience represented just in one's physical body, to be here, to be along this end of the spectrum of these generations and generations of survival, then I think even if someone does not have a belief in reciprocity or is uncomfortable with the concept of relational kind of experience with ancestors, there still is a kind of additional strength that comes from being really aware of what I represent in terms of this just awesome line of resilience. Yeah.
Thank you. And what happens if I, for example, don't know anything about my ancestors? So, for example, if people are adopted or there is just no information available due to, disasters or something, how can this relationship be built then?
Right. So I think that the first thing is that it is an actual reality that we do come from someone. So even if someone is adopted and has been removed from that particular history, from the details of that lineage, it still is represented in my eyes, my blood type. So I really am a representative of that line of descendancy. I think that the beauty of constellation work is that there is a way to actually incorporate and to acknowledge that biological truth, and to really revere, to really appreciate whoever it is that provided care if I have been adopted, to be able really to give full space. And it's a challenge for Western minds to really carry that duality, or um, the the kind of complication of what actually happened, that there really is a space for the whole of the story. So, so yeah, I think that if someone has not been connected to their own ancestral lineage, it's it's possible to just be aware of it in terms of acknowledging it is the truth of my biology. There's something else that's very simple. Sometimes, even if a person has been adopted, if they have not, um, one of the things that's really sweet is just beginning to ask questions, and to look at photographs, and to ask uh, for stories, to ask, where did this person come from? Where did that person come from? And to be able to really start to integrate what is actually the history, what is the impact of what happened to these people in my family line. And something else that I think there are many reasons to be cautious, but I've been really astounded by the experiences that some people have had when they have decided to actually look into DNA testing. So if they were adopted, or if their story, their family story, was incomplete because of the trauma of migration or immigration, or um, some kind of disconnect, it's really astounded me how some people actually, usually, of course, from where I sit, from the point of beginning with family constellation, having sort of an opening, a curiosity about, what does this mean? Family system, ancestors, lineage. What does that mean? And so it's astounded me. I don't know that I've really overtly recommended it, but I've gotten a lot of feedback. A number of people who um, were supported by constellation work and wanted more actual information, and found surprises. And in fact, in several instances, actually found family who had been looking for them, or who really had a space for them. So I think that there are many paths, and having my own worldview, I sometimes think ancestors may be involved in being sure that the people are able to connect, and it's just something I have in my imagination about what happens with those. Yeah, beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you for this. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the concept of ancestral work. I don't know if you use this word at all, or this combination of words, and if you do, what does it mean?
I don't think that it was really a part of my vocabulary as much as it was just a part of my reality. That that we are not anything without ancestors, and so I think in my own family system there was acknowledging that there were stories, a different language associated. So there really was a sense and a pulse that that had ancestors present. So the concept was really not. It almost didn't feel like a concept because it was just integral. And then for me, at a certain point, um, as had some other people in my family, I began to experience ancestors in the form of dreams. And there would be ancestors originally my own and those from my own family system who would come and essentially bring information that would be supportive or that would perhaps prepare me for things that were going to happen, losses that would occur. And so there was sort of this uh, courteous public service announcements that came from ancestors, and they were very helpful. And as I got older, it could happen that there would also be dreams in which ancestors of other people came. But I actually was mentored by a grandmother, and so even the context of what might be called ancestral work was considered very ordinary. And there's really no involvement of ego, um, lots of very clear boundaries, very, very clear boundaries. So, if, for instance, something came in a dream, it's not my job to interpret it or to expand it or to add to it, but to really pray and um, see, do I have permission to share it, or is this just something that gives me an invitation to pray? And so the context that I had was that essentially those pieces of information are, at least in my context, are for the purpose of really giving a person a heads up. This person, this part of the family is going to need prayer. And then the other part of it was if, for instance, um, the event or the announcement has to do with an impending death, to really pray for that person specifically, to pray. If it could be prevented, I really hope that that could happen. If it cannot be prevented, then I really pray that whatever forces, whatever is God, whatever is goodwill of the ancestors all around them, that that person would be uh, in a good relationship with all of the people in their circle, so that when they leave, there's not a tremendous amount of guilt or regret or conflicts. So, part of the announcement from the ancestors was to just be able to pray that that person would, if they're walking on, that they would be able to go in a very good way. And so, in my case, in my context, it was really very simple. Not a lot of uh, external things involved, other than just simply telling exactly what was the dream, not what my interpretation is or anything additional, but really, this is what I dreamed. If it's helpful, I'm glad. Um, but also to ask, do I have permission to tell this dream? And in most cases, there's no need. So, yeah, so that's for me, the ancestral work was not so much work as just kind of like breathing, something that would come in that needed again to go out, um, and also something that did not have a context that did not relate to pathology in Western psychology. So it was considered very much connected to delusions or um, some sort of psychosis. There was in Western psychology, particularly at that time when I was 17, not a lot of space for including those kind of phenomenon that really are human and present in many in all cultures. All cultures. Yeah.
Thank you. I have so many questions just out of this. One question I would like to ask is around the concept of the well ancestors and unwell ancestors. If you can
Mhm.
say something about that.
Yeah. So I guess that another part of just my own definitions or my own experience or understanding, is that the ancestors are, first of all, um, our relatives and human beings. So this means that for sure, some ancestors are very benevolent and very friendly and also have capacity, huge capacity. And some ancestors are not as strong or not as uh, involved, or perhaps are busy working out their own development or their own resolution, their own uh, wounds, recovering, finding their place in that ancestral realm um, in a very good way, but actually busy with that. And so, from my conditioning, I guess, what I do tend to do is I invite those who are willing and those who are able to support. And part of the reason for the specificity is because if someone has difficulty with relationships, then I will be very specific, because in my um, conditioning, it's appropriate to be clear. I think that that's part of the, maybe you could say, protocols, that it's not just here and there, and there's some benefit in having clarity. So if someone is looking for resolution for systemic difficulty and issues with relationship, what we know is that we represent many, many, many generations. So I would really solicit those ancestors who had a wonderful way with love. And this doesn't mean that they never had an argument with their partner. It doesn't mean that they never had loss. But most of all, they somehow had this incredible understanding, this incredible experience with being able to be connected with someone that they love. And all of the things that that means: negotiation, physicality, sexuality, a celebration, all of the fiber of those very lucky people who just had such passion and such ease with love. Those are the ones that I would ask to come and stand with that person and support them. And in constellation work, if someone is uncomfortable with the concept of ancestors, I do that just privately. I ask the people in their family system who had all of these gifts and this familiarity with relationship to supervise me, to please help me to work with this person, and please give me permission to work with this person. Because most certainly, with all the joy that they had in that aspect of being connected in a loving relationship, they wish for that to be a part of um, their legacy and the life of their descendants. So yeah, it's very sweet. So I tend to solicit those who really have the greatest history, the greatest substance. Um, and it's not an exclusion of the other, but really having a place of respect that, um, just as in life, even in death, we represent particular gifts that we had, particular expertise um, and compassion. Some are just extremely compassionate and gentle, and some are very firm, and some are tired.
Francesca, you mentioned that that situation where somebody might not want to call in the ancestors to engage with them with ancestors. So my question is around why would somebody possibly not want to go there? What are potential, if any, side effects of
Yeah.
the relationship and work?
I think it's really important to respect a person's beliefs and their conditioning, um, their culture, and even their fears. So it's not an unusual thing that um, that ancestors or spirits, or sometimes even very rarely, but it has even occurred that when someone was exposed to the knowing field, to phenomenology in constellation, that someone could become very afraid, that there's clearly something that's happening that does not seem to be linear, that is not within my framework of what I've experienced or what is ordinary or what is familiar. So I think that I always try to be aware, um, are there those for whom even being present in this field is challenging? So I think that culture, beliefs, conditioning, um, it's a very interesting thing that some people may have it be in conflict with their religious beliefs, or some people may have cultural restrictions about, for instance, naming the dead. There are a number of things. So I think that's why it's good to ask, um, to really be sure, is someone okay with this, and to know that, particularly with constellation work, and I think the love of the ancestors, it's so effective and it's so generous that it doesn't have to be overt. So if someone is not comfortable, or if they feel like they would be disloyal to their family's belief system, that this would be disrespecting the religious precepts of their father or their mother. I really want not to, um, I certainly don't want to disintegrate something that is for them an asset or a value. So that's just one of the reasons that I think, or several of the reasons that I think some people may not be comfortable with it. Um, and then the other thing is the cultural piece, I think, is also in modernity, in our modern, um, being the result of so many migrations. So many of us are really separated from the history, from the lineage. So it really is like a fiction. It's not something that we have a concrete reference for. So even if someone doesn't have prohibitions, the context is often really not quite there. So I think that it's a beautiful gift that constellation work has this as a possibility, because part of the beauty is, even if someone's not doing their own constellation, when they stand as a representative for an ancestor and feel a kind of benevolence, a kind of connection, and a kind of care, that's so lovely, because they have not been pushed, or they haven't compromised their family, but they have been in touch with that warmth, that healing sense.
Thank you. Um, the opposite of that question about the resistance or the no permission to this work would be, so provided there is permission and potentially there is context to it, but say if I come from a background with absolutely no experience, no understanding of that, and then suddenly I come across the ancestral work, why would I want to do it? What is the potential? And you've named several already that I can refer to, but why would I be willing or interested or needing to do this work?
You know, one of the things that has been such a surprise to me, and to many people, a lot of people are lonely. I think it's the one of the largest contributors to all kinds of depression and feelings of isolation. And so there is this actually huge epidemic, I guess you could say, of isolation. People who feel truly disconnected, who really feel that they have nowhere, no one with whom they belong. So, no sense of belonging, a sense of isolation, a sense of deep loneliness. All of those are fiction when we really look at what's true about our body and how it is that we're here. We definitely belong. Each person, we belong. And so one of the big joys that I have is that constellation work for many people reinforces and strengthens this incredible reality. I definitely belong. I have a family. I have ancestors. I have a, a legacy that I come from. And it's not that those have never faced challenge or loss or conflicts, but they survived and passed life and passed life and passed life. And here I am, and oh my gosh, that represents something quite amazing. And so this sense of real connection is, I think it's really it can't be exaggerated or overstated to see what happens for people, um, and that's just the internal. That's not even including this phenomenon that we see in constellation work, which is beyond concrete explanation at this moment in time. And it is that very often doors open. So someone does a constellation, and lo and behold, in the market, they end up standing next to someone who represents the family line that they have never been in contact with. And it's amazing. Or someone sends them a package and says, "Oh, I found this in a house that I bought, and it had your name, and I looked up your name, and so I thought you might like it." And it's a photo album of ancestors. There have been just some very interesting things that have happened in terms of people beginning to do constellation work, and at this point, it's so anecdotal. We don't have data on it, but it's definitely uh, very few people that have been involved in constellation work are not aware of some event like that, um, where actual doors just open and someone sees that it's not just figurative, it's not just a concept, but indeed, I am connected to other people. I am truly not alone. I am truly not isolated. Um, I didn't just hatch from an egg in isolation. I really came from something, and all of those histories have some very deep beauty. Um, Horrors as well. But I think that that's also part of the gift of constellation work, that if we're able to really look at the breadth of what is included in our own family history, we certainly have more room. Uh, we're more generous with other people, perhaps less judgmental, because we all carry virtually every possibility within our bones. And here we are. Yeah.
This is just so powerful. Even saying in my mind, I belong, has a resonance everywhere in my body. I would like to ask, if you could suggest a first step for somebody who's never done this before and would like to do it, but maybe not jump into a constellation workshop, or maybe together with. So if there is something that I can do for myself as a step to start building that relationship with my ancestors.
So I think the simplest thing that is so classic um, is really whether it's on your own or someplace outside, just to do the meditation where I am aware that my body, my blood, my bones, that they're here because I have parents. Those two people, whatever they did or whatever they didn't do, they actually had everything to do with my being alive. And they also did not just hatch as an egg someplace in isolation. They also had parents and the parents behind and the parents behind. And I think that there's something lovely about doing that visualization because there's there's nothing to push. So if someone really feels like spending some time with that, they can, and they can begin to feel in their body this resonance of these many, many lines of ancestors. So I think it's really beautiful just to do that visualization, that meditation, just to be aware of that reality. And I really love when people are nervous about the concept. Um, I think it's so supportive just to say this is just biology. This is really just, it's just true in terms of biology that life was passed on and passed on and passed on. And then we have, when we're looking at systems, we have all the complexity that goes with what happened in each of those generations. But to be really aware of um, my own strength and my own resilience, there is something amazing that comes from just being in a space and being able to have a sense of that inheritance. And I think that that's also the the aspect of inheritance is also really wonderful because it helps me also perhaps spend time with the treasures. So if for a moment we think about, and it's in all humility, think about honestly, what are the gifts that you have been given? And so in a lot of indigenous traditions, there's also a different concept about gifts that we all come into the world with a gift or gifts that are really not for us at all, have almost nothing to do with us. They're for purpose, they're for service, they're for us to share in a generous way. And very often those gifts are part of a family legacy. So if I also began to feel into what are my gifts, and to just sit for a moment and invite for those who are behind me, those I come from, who knew how to use this gift in a good way, please come stand with me. And so it's a very sweet thing to be able to have this exchange, acknowledging um, the lineage of these different um, beauties and talents and um, just treasures that that you carry, that you just have always had, and um, and to be able to just in a very quiet way invite an exchange with those ancestors through whom those treasures have been passed down. So perhaps those are some simple things. Yeah.
Thank you. This is very beautiful and very practical. This is something to just take away and do. One question before the last question. If you um, if you have a story from your own experience that you could share of how ancestral or systemic work was transformational for your own life story.
I think um, it's very simple, but it did make a huge difference for me. Um, some people are well traveled. They, particularly in Europe, the countries are small, and so people very easily are fluid and go from one place to another to another. And when I began constellation work, I had never been on an airplane. And so I was a little, or perhaps a lot, overwhelmed. I thought, what am I doing to go really across the ocean to some place that I have never been? Um, what what am I doing? I don't know what this is going to be like, and um, I don't want to be uh, make a mistake and it's experienced as rude because I don't know that culture. I really spent some time just kind of ruminating, oh my, oh my, oh my. And then it just happened that I was sitting outside and it was very simple and so true. I just began to realize, well, on my mother's side, I come from nomads. And so our whole way of moving in life has been one of mobility, one of being able to be grateful and to be connected with the place that I am. And the other side is that I came on my father's side from two streams of immigrants. And I thought, I'm not the first person to go across the ocean. However, they came in a different direction, but still, to know that mobility and even that particular journey, that they were both a part of my ancestral story. And really, for me, when that came, whether with their help or conceptual, I think it could be debated by people depending upon their worldview, but I felt such a stillness and such a happiness. And so it was as though they were going with me and I was doing something that is in my bones. So I truly did not feel that it was an experience that did not belong to me, and in fact, it was not a foreign experience. It was really something that is remembered in my bones. And I felt so happy and so comfortable, and that has stayed with me. If I ever have privilege to travel anywhere, I just feel that blessing that in my ancestral story, in every direction, that joy of movement and new experience and hearing different languages and different sounds and smells, that is somehow familiar and integral and and part of the story of how it is that I'm here. And so I'm very grateful for that. So yes, that was a big relief to have that transition, but it's really lovely how it stayed with me and it really opened a door to appreciating a particular part of my ancestry that had never even occurred to me. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. Beautiful.
Thank you for sharing this. It really resonates with me. Before we close this beautiful conversation, I'm wondering if you have anything else to say in terms of the current realities that we are sitting in with, but in the context of ancestors.
Definitely. One of the things that helps me, that I um, often sit outside in nature, but the other thing that helps me is writing. That there are times that I feel as though I have some support and there's some kind of clarity that's coming. But when I begin to write it down, then I can see, oh, this is clear. This is really how this fits together. And so one of the things that was coming into my heart, and I think as for many of us, was in terms of systems, what really are supports that systemic thinking or constellation work, what are supports, the frameworks or framework that can really help us to continue to make these changes, very needed changes that we're being called to do. And so I'll share, it's very short, um, and I think maybe I was a little surprised how many people it resonated with. And it really is just a kind of a looking at family systems constellation and how it fits with the kinds of transitions that we're making right now. And it's fairly short. In family systems constellation, we understand that one of the barriers to change is our fear that we will be excluded if we're not loyal to our family history, beliefs, destiny. To begin systemic change, it's important to honor the fate of the ancestors and to take responsibility for our own path and to have the courage to go a new way. So I really said this as a prayer, and if it feels good for your heart, maybe you can say something similar or see what grows from this. My dear ancestors, thank you for the part you had in giving me my life. I am your descendant. I am not your judge. I cannot carry your pain. I cannot carry your rage. I cannot carry your prejudice or your heavy fate. I can only carry my life in a good way. Please bless me if I go a different way than you did. If you cannot bless my path, I take the good I have received from you and I leave the rest with you. Only you can carry what's yours. Only I can carry what's mine. As I make the world a better place, I will honor you, both your abilities and your limitations. As I take this good road, all who come after me will have an easier path.
Thank you. I'm just sitting with that a little bit because it feels as if it's finding its way in my system.
Mhm.
And it touches on the point of the future ancestors, doesn't it? How we become the living ancestors for the future.
Yeah.
And the future generations will become ancestors for their future generations.
Mhm. Mhm.
This connection between the past and the present and the future. Mm. Thank you so much, Francesca. This has been such a blessed and valuable and precious experience and a conversation. Thank you for your wisdom and for all the work, the life-changing work that you do with people.
Aleksandra, thank you so much for sharing your gifts. I really appreciate it, and I'm very touched by it. Thank you.
Thank you.